I never leave my windows open at night anymore. Not after what happened. The forest that once felt like a playground turned into something else entirely. It started with faint whispers, barely audible over the rustling leaves. At first, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on me. But then the whispers grew louder, more distinct, forming words I couldn't understand. My parents dismissed it as an overactive imagination, but I knew something was wrong. The sounds were coming from deep within the woods, and they were getting closer each night. I tried to ignore them, to convince myself it was nothing. But the night I chose to listen, everything changed. Now, I keep my windows shut tight, hoping the whispers won't find their way back in. If you ever hear strange sounds from the forest at night, shut your ears. Do not listen. Trust me. I suppose the story began long before the sounds reached my ears, but I only understood that later. Growing up in Briar Ridge, a town hidden beneath a veil of pine canopies and dense fog, I never thought anything about the forest behind our house. It was just there. Trees, leaves, wind. It breathed as nature did, alive but indifferent. My name is Oliver Hensley. I was 11 when it happened. We had just moved into a 2-story house at the end of Ridge Hollow Road. The backyard ended where the trees began. There was no fence, no lights, and no neighbors on either side. My father had taken a transfer with the forestry department. He said it would be peaceful here. A fresh start after my mother's illness. That is what he called it, an illness. As if grief was something you caught and cured. He worked late shifts, which meant I spent many evenings alone. I had books, puzzles, and our old Labrador, Jasper, who had been with us since I was 5. The first few weeks were quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that presses on your skin. I thought I would get used to it. I was wrong. It was early autumn when I first heard it. The sun had dipped behind the trees, bleeding golden light across my bedroom wall. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed Jasper staring out the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. His ears were stiff. His tail was low. He let out a low whimper and stepped back. I followed his gaze. Nothing. Just the tree lean. Wind pushed through the leaves in slow, ghostly waves. But then I heard it. Not a howl. Not footsteps. Something softer. A pattern. Words, almost, but not in any language I knew. A sound like voices in the shape of wind. I stepped closer. Jasper growled. My father got home around 9 that night. I told him what I heard. He chuckled, ruffled my hair, and said, "This place gets to you at first. Trees make strange sounds, especially this deep in the woods." I wanted to believe him. But trees do not whisper your name. Not like that. A few days later, I ventured deeper into the woods. It was Saturday. My father was gone again, doing some forestry mapping north of town. I took Jasper with me. I needed to know what was out there. We followed the trail behind the house until it split near an old pine tree scarred with deep gashes. Not claw marks. Symbols. Vertical slashes intersected by uneven circles. The trail curved downward into a hollow. That is where I saw them. Small wooden figures tied to branches with red string. Each one twisted differently, but all with hollowed-out heads. Dozens of them. In the center of the hollow sat a smooth stone altar, stained with something black and dried. Around it were more of those symbols, burned into the soil like some sort of ritual site. Jasper growled, teeth bared. Then I heard the whisper again, closer this time. I ran. That night, the whisper returned at exactly 11:30 p.m. I sat upright in bed, sheets clenched in my fists. The sound trickled through my closed window, as if it had slipped beneath the glass. It was chanting. Slow, deliberate. There was rhythm, like breath in motion. I pulled Jasper close. He trembled. I told my father again the next morning. He was already halfway out the door, coffee in hand. "Buddy, you are letting your imagination run wild. I told you. Trees do strange things. Probably just animals. But no animals chant in unison. No trees call your name in whispers made of mist." By the 4th night, I had memorized the pattern. It always started at exactly 11:30 p.m. and stopped at 4 in the morning. Boys. Without fail. I knew the intervals. I counted them. I did not sleep. The 5th night was colder. Not by weather, but by something deeper. The kind of cold that sinks into your ribs and tells your body it should not be where it is. That night, I sat beside my window, eyes locked on the forest edge. I had stopped telling my father by then. It was easier to pretend. He was always tired, always distracted. He wanted peace, and my fear interrupted that. I counted the time until it began: 11:26, 11:27, 11:28. Jasper whimpered at my feet. At exactly 11:30, the chanting began again, low and distant, like a congregation humming through their teeth. But something was different this time. I saw him. A figure emerged from the trees, tall, unmoving, draped in something torn and dark. His arms hung stiff at his sides. But it was the mask that froze me. It looked like the head of a stag, antlers curled upward in a spiral. But the mask was no carving. It was not clean. It looked dried, stretched. He did not move. He only stood there, listening. Jasper barked once, then backed away, tail between his legs. The chanting paused. The figure raised his hand slowly and pointed toward me. I shut the blinds, heart punching my chest. When I opened them again moments later, he was gone. The chanting had resumed. At school the next day, I tried to explain it to my only friend, Devin. He listened but gave me a look I knew too well. Pity mixed with worry. The kind people give when they are deciding if you are just strange or truly broken. No one believed me. Not my friend. Not my father. Not the school counselor who called me in to ask if everything was okay at home. I stopped talking. I started watching instead. By the 8th night, I had become someone else. I no longer waited for the chanting, I expected it. I no longer feared the figure, I anticipated him. He came every night. Same place. Same time. Same stillness. But the 9th night changed everything. There was no chanting that night. Only silence. The silence was not peace. It was a vacuum. An absence of every living sound. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. At midnight, a knock echoed through the house. 3 sharp raps. Not from the front door. From the back. The sliding glass door that opened to the forest. Jasper barked like he had never barked before, a sound born of panic. I grabbed him and pulled him back, inching to the window. There he was. The figure. Closer this time. Standing right at the glass, his mask pressed almost against it. In his hand, he held something. A candle. Thin. A single, unlit wick. He raised it slowly. Not as an offering, but as an instruction. Then he was gone. My father came downstairs minutes later, groggy and angry. I tried to tell him, but he did not listen. He did not look. He muttered something about needing sleep and went back upstairs. I approached the glass, breath fogging the window. Lying on the porch outside was the candle. The note came the next day. Folded, square, and blank on the outside, it was tucked beneath our doormat when I went out to bring in the mail. Inside, written in black ink in looping script. Place the candle at the forest's edge. Sit behind it. Legs crossed. Back straight. Face the trees. Keep your ears open. Listen. And you will see. That was all. No name. No threats. Just a command. An invitation. I burned the note in the fireplace. That night, the chanting returned. Louder than ever. No longer distant. No longer soft. The pulsed. It vibrated in my bones. At exactly 1 a.m., Jasper began howling. Not barking. Howling like a wolf mourning the moon. Then he went still. Silent. I ran to him and felt his heartbeat. Ready. As if he had run for miles in place. He would not move. I knew then what they were doing. They were not asking. They were warning. I did not tell my father about the candle. I did not tell him about the note. By then, the silence between us had grown thick enough to drown in. We moved through the same rooms like ghosts. He would leave early and come home late. I would pretend to sleep when he got back. Sometimes I wondered if he did the same. That night, I stayed awake again. My eyes burned. My limbs felt leaden. But I was afraid of what would happen if I slept. I sat on the floor beside my bed, Jasper curled beside me, still weak but breathing. I laid the red candle on the floor. I stared at it. It stared back. The forest seemed to pulse outside the glass. Shadows moved between trees. Not in the way leaves blow. Not the way wind rustles. This was rhythm, purpose, choreographed stillness. And then I saw them. Not just one figure anymore. Each stood shoulder to shoulder at the forest's edge. Each one wore a different animal's head: goat, wolf, crow, fox, stag. Their masks were old, rotten in places. Some had missing fur, others bore deep, dried cracks in the bone. The chanting began again, but it was not coming from the woods anymore. It was coming from everywhere. From above. From beneath the floorboards. From inside my ears. I covered them, but the sound only grew louder. I looked at the candle. I picked it up. It felt warm. Warmer than it should have been. As if something had already lit it. I went downstairs. Not knowing why. Or maybe knowing too well. The back door creaked as I opened it. Cold air bit my face. Grass prickled my feet. I walked toward the trees. My legs moved like they were not mine. My mind shouted to stop, to turn back, but my body had already decided. I reached the edge. The line where grass ended and forest began. The line I had never crossed at night. I placed the candle down. I sat behind it. I crossed my legs. Right over left. Left over right. I waited. The chanting stopped. One of them stepped forward. The goat. He moved slowly as if time thickened around him. He bent down on one knee and lowered something to the ground in front of the candle. It was a second candle, but melted on one side. Its wick was smoldering. He did not speak. He only stared. And then he vanished. Not turned or walked, vanished. Gone between one blink and the next. The others followed. One by one, they stepped back and disappeared into the trees like ink spilled in water. The forest went silent again. But not empty. I woke up in my bed. I did not remember walking back to the house. I did not remember going to sleep. But the red candle was gone from my room. The next morning, I found blood on the porch. Just a small smear, the size of a palm. I bent down to touch it, but Jasper barked and growled at me. A single warning. When I stood, I noticed something carved into the wood just outside the glass door. It was one of the symbols I had seen on the trees. A vertical slash intersected by two jagged half circles. Beneath it in thin script, one promise made, one debt left. I stared at it for a long time. The chanting did not return that night, nor the next. For 5 nights, the forest was dead quiet. I began to think it was over. I began to think maybe it had been a nightmare after all. But something felt wrong in the silence. Jasper refused to go near the glass. My father began to complain of headaches. I caught him staring at the forest more than once, his eyes unfocused, mouth slightly open, like he was listening for something. I started seeing the figures in daylight, in glimpses, in reflections, in the mirror behind me when I brushed my teeth, in the glass of the microwave as I waited for soup. Always behind me, always gone when I turned. One afternoon, I saw something worse. A photograph on my father's desk. A picture of him and 5 other men, all smiling, arms slung across shoulders like old friends. One of them wore those same narrow, black sunglasses. Another wore a necklace of bones. I stared at the picture for a long time. Then I flipped it over. Written in shaky black ink. Briar Ridge, October. Before we left the circle. My father never mentioned it. I never asked. It was a Friday night. I remember because my father came home with takeout, which he only did on Fridays. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, biscuits. He set it on the table without a word and went upstairs. I ate alone. Jasper sat beside me but would not touch his bowl. That was the first clue. The second was the smell. It came through the vents. Like meat gone sour. Like something wet left too long under a hot sun. I followed it up the stairs. I should not have. I opened the door to my father's room. He was sitting at the edge of the bed, eyes closed, whispering something under his breath. I called his name. He did not answer. I stepped closer. His eyes opened. But they were not his eyes anymore. They were too wide, too black, like glass marbles soaked in ink. He stood slowly. He raised his hand, and it was the black candle. "Go outside," he whispered. "They are waiting." I ran, down the stairs, through the hall, to the front door. But the door would not open. The chain lock had been bolted, a lock we never used. Behind me, footsteps creaked down the stairs. Slow, measured. I turned toward the sliding glass door and saw them, all 5, standing just outside, in the exact same formation, like they had never left. And in the center, someone new. The goat again, but larger now, taller, its horns longer, sharper. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "I did what you asked." I lit the candle. I sat. I listened. "What more do you want?" Behind me, my father whispered. "You listened, now you must answer." The air was thick with the smell of decay, the kind that clung to your skin and gnawed at the back of your throat. I was frozen, unable to move, caught between the door that wouldn't budge and the figures standing just outside. The goat, larger than I remembered, seemed to tower over the others, its eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. It tilted its head slightly, the black beads of its pupils focused directly on me. I turned back to my father. He was standing at the top of the stairs now, his figure an eerie silhouette in the dim light of the hallway. The black candle still flickered in his hand, the flame unnaturally steady despite the lack of wind. His lips moved, but his voice was no longer his own. It was a rasping, guttural growl that vibrated through my chest. "You've made your choice," he said, his voice merging with the voices of the others, a chorus of whispers that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. My mind screamed for me to run, to break through the glass door and escape, but my legs felt like stone. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the goat's hollow gaze, the sharp twist of its horns casting long shadows on the ground as it took a step forward, its hooves clicking on the pavement. "You're not my father," I said, the words leaving my mouth in a choked whisper. I wanted to scream, to tear this illusion apart, but the air around me felt thick and heavy, like I was breathing underwater. My father, if it was even him anymore, didn't respond. Instead, he raised the candle higher, the flame flickering as it seemed to grow brighter, the light casting grotesque, distorting shadows on the walls. The figures outside shifted, their bodies jerking unnaturally, like marionettes controlled by unseen strings. They were moving closer. I could hear the scraping of their limbs dragging along the ground, the harsh sound of bones grinding against each other. Each of them wore a twisted mask, their features hidden, but their presence was undeniable, suffocating. And then the goat spoke, its voice deep and resonant, not coming from its mouth but from everywhere at once. "Answer the question, child. What do you desire?" I didn't understand. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I had listened to the whispers before, I had lit the candle, and I had been waiting, but this was too much. But the goat's words pulled me in. The question hung in the air like a chain, dragging me down. "What do you desire?" it repeated, and in the silence that followed, it felt like the whole world was waiting for my answer. I swallowed hard. My mind raced, trying to grasp some semblance of control. I had listened. I had done everything they asked. And yet, I had never been prepared for this. I didn't know what to say. I don't know, I muttered, my voice cracking. I just wanted to be safe. I wanted to be with my family. To not be alone. The goat tilted its head, its gaze narrowing as if it were considering my words. The other figures stood still, unmoving, like statues. "You desired safety," the goat said, its voice cold as ice. "But you have already made your choice. You have already answered." I felt the ground beneath me tremble, a low, rumbling vibration that made the floorboards creak. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What choice? What did I answer?" The goat didn't answer right away. Instead, the figures around me began to move, their limbs twisting unnaturally, contorting like they were made of liquid. They closed in on me, each step deliberate, like a trap tightening around my chest. "You answered with your actions," the goat intoned. "You sought what was never meant to be yours. You called for the candle, you asked for its light, and in doing so, You invited us." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. I didn't know. I didn't mean it." The goat let out a low, throaty chuckle. "It is too late for regret, child. You have already chosen. You desired what was forbidden." The figures outside, those strange, contorted beings, were now close enough that I could hear the rasp of their breath, like something crawling from the deepest pits of the earth. They reached out with long, thin hands, their fingertips grazing the glass of the sliding door. The chill that radiated from them seemed to seep into my bones, freezing me in place. I turned back to my father, no, the thing that was pretending to be him, and saw that his expression had changed. The vacant, glassy stare was gone. In its place was a twisted, mocking smile. The same smile I had seen on the goat, the same one I had seen in my dreams. "You should have stayed away." My father's voice, now so alien, so wrong, spoke again, but this time there was a cruel undertone, a hidden meaning. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and I realized with growing horror that the house itself was shifting. The walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, as if the structure was alive, breathing. I could feel something moving beneath the floorboards, something terrible, something ancient. The goat moved closer, its hooves dragging along the ground, the black eyes boring into mine. It reached out, its long, gnarled fingers coming closer and closer. "You are ours now," it said, its voice like thunder. "Your soul has been claimed." I stumbled back, the realization crashing down on me like a wave. I had been foolish. I had called to them. I had made the deal without understanding the cost. Suddenly, the room darkened. The candle's flame snuffed out in an instant, plunging everything into darkness. But the figures didn't stop. They were still there, just inches from me now, reaching, touching, pulling me towards them. I felt their cold hands grip my arms, dragging me toward the door, toward the unholy gathering outside. I struggled, but it was useless. They were too strong. The goat stood in the center, watching, waiting for me to join them. And as I was pulled through the door, through the glass, into the cold night air, I heard my father's voice one last time, echoing through the dark. "Now you must answer." And in that moment, I realized with sickening clarity, there was no escape. The answer had always been within me. It was me. The world outside was not the one I had known. The air was thick with a pungent, rotting odor, like the stench of something old, forgotten, and long dead. The trees were twisted, gnarled things, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands, scraping the dark sky. The ground beneath my feet was soft, almost as if it was alive, sucking at my shoes with every step. I tried to pull away, but my legs felt heavy, as though the earth itself was pulling me down into its depths. The figures, the ones who had followed me through the door, stood in their perfect, unnatural formation. I could see them now, fully, their twisted bodies, their faces hidden behind masks of bone and decay, the way their limbs seemed to move in sharp, jerking motions that defied all human understanding. And at the center, towering over the rest, was the goat. Its black eyes burned into mine as it took another slow step forward, its long, sharp horns casting long shadows across the ground. "You wanted safety," it intoned, its voice deep and reverberating through my chest. "You wanted to belong, to have what you lost. But you are already ours, child. You answered when you lit the candle. You are the price." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My mind was spinning, trying to grasp any shred of reality, any piece of logic that could make sense of the horrors unfolding around me. But there was nothing left to hold on to. "Why?" I managed to croak. My voice sounded foreign to my ears, like it wasn't mine. "Why me? Why my family?" The goat tilted its head, its black eyes narrowing as if considering my question, the smile beneath its mask twisted in cruel amusement. "You called to us. You asked for what you should never have touched," it replied, its voice growing more guttural, more unsettling. "In doing so, you awakened something that should have stayed buried. You sought what could not be granted, and now you will answer for it." I staggered backward, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, the figures closing in around me. The space was shrinking, the air growing colder with each passing second. Behind me, I heard a low, gravelly voice, my father's voice, but not my father, coming from the dark mass of shadows that surrounded the group. You wanted safety, but there is no safety here. Not anymore. I turned toward him, my breath hitching in my throat as I saw him standing among them, a puppet of sorts. His face was pale, his eyes still wide and black like the goat's, and there was no hint of recognition in his expression. "You've made your choice," he continued, his words slow and deliberate, like a chant. "Now you must become what you feared most. What you've always been." My pulse raced. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. My limbs were frozen, my mind tangled in the web of the unearthly voices that seemed to grow louder with each passing second. The figures stepped closer. The goat stepped closer. I wanted to fight. I wanted to escape. But there was no escape. There was nothing but this cursed, desolate place and the eerie, hollow eyes staring back at me. "You wanted to belong," the goat whispered again, its voice soft yet thunderous, a haunting lullaby. "But you were never meant to belong here." The ground shook again, and I fell to my knees, feeling as though the earth itself was rejecting me, forcing me down into the darkness. "You have to make a choice," the goat said, its voice a sharp hiss now, like a snake coiling around me. "Answer, or become like us." I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. I wanted to shout, to beg for mercy, but all I could do was tremble, unable to comprehend the enormity of what was happening. The goat bent low, its black eyes never leaving mine. "You will answer me, child. This is your final test." Suddenly, the world around me warped. The ground beneath me cracked open, and I could feel the heat of something ancient, something powerful, rising up from the depths of the earth. A deep, rumbling growl echoed from beneath the cracked soil, and the air seemed to vibrate with the weight of it. The figures began to chant, their voices merging into a low, rhythmic hum. The sound was almost unbearable, like an overwhelming force pushing against my skull. The goat raised its hand, and I saw it, something I hadn't noticed before. In the shadows, there was something shifting, something large and impossibly black. It moved in the shape of a person, but it wasn't a person. It was a shape, an entity that defied all reason. And then I understood. I was the one they had been waiting for. I had made the choice the moment I lit the candle. I had called them to me. I had brought this curse upon my family, upon myself. It was all part of the plan. I was the answer. I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in on me from all sides, consuming me. I was being pulled into something terrible, something irreversible. And then I realized there was no turning back. I was already gone. "Join us," the goat's voice whispered one final time. "Become what you were always meant to be." I didn't have the strength to resist anymore. As the last thread of my consciousness slipped away, I heard the voice of my father once more. "You listened," he said softly, his tone almost kind now. "Now you will understand." And in that moment, I knew that the world I had known, the life I had lived, was gone forever. It was replaced by something much darker, something ancient. Something that would never let me go. The figures closed in, their cold hands reaching out to claim me. And in the void, I finally understood the truth. I had never been safe. I had always been theirs. The last thing I felt before everything went dark was the sharp, cold pressure of the goat's hand on my shoulder. And then there was nothing.